hear me? So I think we're getting ready now for our last and final panel session. Not the least, but the last one that pretty much brings everything together. Because what's the reason we're here? For togetherness. And now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our next speaker. I know everyone is bustling around, but please, we invite you to still, please be engaged. We're almost done. We're almost done, we promise. And we promise it's going to be a session that you don't want to miss. So, our next speaker, Ms. Balogi Stephen, is a lawyer and a seasoned communications and media professional with a dynamic portfolio as a producer, a talk show, a host, a public speaker, a writer, and a filmmaker. She's known for her engaging presence and ability to connect with diverse audiences. She brings a wealth of experiences in facilitating impactful conversations that inspire action. So we know it's going to be a very good talk. She's an author, she's an experienced trainer, mentoring public speakers, teenagers, and young adults in life, purpose, and leadership. Balogi blends legal expertise, compelling storytelling, and people-centered leadership in every project she undertakes, making her a valuable asset to us, to initiatives that she seeks to inform, inspire, and drive meaningful change. Without further ado, please welcome to the stage, Ms. Balogi.
Thank you so much. You're doing such a great job. Hello, everybody. Are we still here? We're still here, right? Yes, I know it's the last panel, but the energy should still be high because we have a lot in store. Before I invite the amazing people on this panel session, I just want to do something brief with us, if you don't mind. So I'm going to call out a word. It's a word association game, if you want to call it that. I'll call out a word, and you just call out the first thing that comes to mind. Can we do that?
Yes.
Thank you for that energy. Okay, so the first is Hakuna
Matata.
Awesome. Next, We Rise by. Amazing.
Che.
Nelson.
Che.
Okay. Wakanda.
Aye.
Lagos.
Aye.
Okay, I thought someone was going to say traffic, but that's good. Netflix.
Subscription.
Nice one. Romeo. Okay. And the last word is Ubuntu. Ubuntu.
Okay, it's not Igbo language. Usually it's Anamabia.
That's awesome because that's actually what this panel session is about. And because we didn't get a lot of response, that means we're going to teach on it. So we're here for another 2 hours. Are we ready?
Yes.
All right, so this panel session is about Ubuntu, which is basically the ideology of I am because we are. So we're looking at partnerships in African businesses. And I'll be introducing our panelists for this session. Please, when I call their names up, celebrate them because they are amazing people and they have a lot to share with us today. First up, ladies first, right? First up, I'm going to be calling on Miss Maria Mushi. Please, can you put your hands together for her?
Aye.
She is in the business of linking people. She's the founder of an on-demand service business, and she also runs a hiring agency. Please, let's put our hands together for her again.
Yes, please.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Miss Juliet. Please, let's put our hands together as she comes up. She's a dynamic multi-potentialite who is truly a community leader and builder. She's a financial advisor, a poet. I'm also a poet, so it was very interesting to see that.
Aye.
A poet, a speaker, and a leader. She's a passionate proponent of cooperative movements. Please, let's put our hands together again for Ms. Juliet. And last but definitely not the least, we have Mr. Olowo Kere. Please, let's put our hands together for him.
Aye.
He is a seasoned businessman, a serial entrepreneur with over 30 years experience in events, hospitality, production, and restaurateur. Please, let's celebrate our panelists today.
Okay.
So like I said earlier, this panel is basically about the idea of Ubuntu, which is partnerships. And it's from the ideology of I am because we are. How many of us have ever tried to do a business with, let's say, an Indian, and because they couldn't do it, they said, hold on, I will get somebody for you. And they got somebody for you. I've experienced that. And we can see that when we partner, we would go farther, right? They say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. We will take your questions, but we have a few questions already for our amazing panelists. So please give us your attention, give us your engagement, and we would have a beautiful session. So thank you again, panelists, for being here. I'm going to be asking some questions to us, to nobody in particular. Feel free to speak on any question that you have an answer to. So our first question, we're looking at the African communities, and generally we have a rich communal and sense of, doing things together, especially for social projects like churches, roads, and all of that. However, we find that when it comes to business, there is a reluctance to partner with fellow Africans to do business. So what do you think is the cause of this reluctance to partner with other Africans, and how can we begin to bridge the gap?
Thank you very much. The first issue, maybe the biggest issue that a lot of Black businesses and teams struggle is, number one, trust. Trusting that you can work with somebody and then at the end you're going to share funds equally, or they are going to invest as much, or they are going to be there for the dream till it gets to the end. And another thing will be fear of losing I will say it's ego. Like if I partner with somebody, it's gonna look like it's the two of us, but I just want to maybe feel like it's I did it. So that's another fear when it comes to partnerships. And I would say another could be, I think those are the major two I would say. Or choosing the wrong partner. Partnering with somebody who is not maybe ready, or you guys don't share the same goals. You are intending to grow the business to 2 million, and the other one is intending to grow to 200. So the amount of effort you put in to grow to 2 million is not the same as the 200. Those are the struggles. But I would say trust, you better be a part of a bigger thing than a whole of a small thing. So when you say you can run by yourself and do everything by yourself, you can only grow as much as you can grow because you have a limited time, you have a limited resources and energy. So trying to build relationships first, because we can trust everybody. Learning what are the key things I should look for when I'm looking for somebody to partner with, because anybody can say today I have a business, I want to start a business today, maybe I want to do maybe a detailing business, and then who wants to do it because somebody else wants money and they say, oh, I want to partner with you, doesn't mean they're the right partner. So learning who can be the right partner and seeing their background, their foundation, and their knowing them from what they have experienced, what they have been successful with, can help us identify who is the right partner, and that builds trust. And we need to, just as Black people, as the team, we should also, be sharing information like, okay, I have this, I have that, and let's build something. And when it comes to choosing somebody who has the right goals too, making sure that you disclose everything, having the hard conversations about money. This is where the money is, this is where the other funds have gone. Just, being open to each other, it's very, very helpful. Sometimes we avoid having money conversations because we all know that is tough. But as, partnering with people, in order to be successful, we need to have that.
Thank you, Mariam, for sharing that. Thank you, everyone, because this is the last panel. So the fact that you're still here means a lot to all of us, right? And when right now, we're talking about, I think, the heart of us as a people, right? If we want to grow, if we want to be successful, if we want to build legacies, what do we need to do? If I were to ask that question, I know everyone here will say, oh, we need to cooperate together, right? We need to work together. We're not working together. We're not united. We're not. And I think it's also a story that we're telling ourselves. And I'm not saying whether the story is true or not, but it's a story. And stories are very powerful, right? Stories are powerful because the more you repeat the same story, you start manifesting that behavior, right? So for me, on this panel and in most of the spaces that I'm called to speak on, I use the cooperative lens. And what I mean by that is my whole work for the past, like, how many decades now, is really about studying how communities cooperate to build wealth. And in particular, our community, right? And so what I will share from that work is this, that when we often give examples of communities that cooperate, we're quick to point at other communities that are not African or Black communities. And as much as that is great, to learn from other communities, I'm challenging us today to look inward, look for examples within our communities of people that are cooperating, whether here in North America or even in Nigeria. Because like the question you asked, right, when it comes to social things, building, you know, like if it's community projects, we do that very well. Wedding, someone dies, someone gives, like we show up in numbers. So perhaps maybe the challenge is we've not been taught to transfer the things that we do naturally in the social sphere to our businesses, right? And so when I started doing this work in cooperative economy, we wanted to start proving that we could cooperate. And that's what we started doing. So we're working with different groups. I'll just give a brief example because I want to use storytelling to share, you know, some of these points. So there was a group I was invited to come and consult for and do some coaching for. And they're like, oh, it's an African community, not Nigerian, but one other African community. And if I mention it, I think you probably even know the organization. And they were like, oh, we don't cooperate together. You know, we know how to save money individually, and sometimes we do it as a group, but we've not built any businesses. And so they gave all these examples, like, you know, my sister here talked about. Lack of trust, lack of this, lack of that, and it just went on and on and on. And the question I asked them is, do you now want to change the narrative, or do you want to continue? And they paused, right? And I said, well, that's the question I'm going to leave with you. If you're ready to build collectively, then let's have that conversation about building. And why is the reason I'm sharing this story? Once they decided that they were tired of building individually, for all the reasons that they've been building individually, they decided that they now wanted to try this cooperative approach of partnering, of community. They then invited me and said, okay, how do we do this work? And so when I came in, it was now to tell them that, listen, every group, this thing you think you're facing, every group faces it. Lack of trust is a human thing. If you do business with someone, whether they're Nigerian or Ghanaian or Indian or Canadian, and it's about money, if you don't have structures in place and governance and systems and structures, someone is going to want to cheat the other or abuse the system. Because that's a human thing. Right? So the reason why I pointed all of this to them, I said, okay, let's list out all the possible human things that can happen. Don't make it an African thing. Because once you look at it that way, we now started building, okay, we need to build governance. We need to build partnership frameworks. We need to build stakeholder agreement. We need to build things around finance and who's managing the money and how the reporting is done. Once we put all of that in place, right? Because this system is very structured, right? So once we put all of that in place, that cooperative is running now. They've invested in multi-units, and they are all benefiting from it and creating wealth. So I just want to reframe to say, these challenges exist, but can we overcome them? We can when we decide that finally we want to overcome them. Thank you.
Okay, all right. That's really amazing. And it's a mindset shift, really. It's a mindset shift. Because how you think of something will determine how you go about it. So ask yourself or ask your neighbor, what story are you telling? Can you ask somebody beside you, what story are you telling? What story are you telling? And I like what Ms. Maria said about, do you want to be part of a bigger thing or whole of nothing? That's a really great question. All right, I'm going to go to our next question here, which is about some very daunting statistics. And it says that about 70% of partnerships and 90% of startups don't survive beyond 10 years, often due to partnership breakdowns for reasons like the ones that we've already talked about. So what are some very common early warning signs that we can look at, you know, in a partnership to know, okay, this partnership is going to work or this wouldn't work, and how can partners or founders address them from early on so they don't affect the business?
Okay, thank you, everyone. Juliet, you know, she captured so much. For us to move forward as a collective, it will take a complete and total reorientation of our mindsets, in the sense that that individualism has to go away, and we have to embrace what we call collective wealth, you know, or collective wealth building. For a lot of partnerships that obviously don't stand the test of time, the biggest challenge is right from the offset, you know, the structures that you start building, how you start building these structures. A lot of people get into things without really thinking it through. To be successful at anything, you need to be able to, especially in business, you need to be able to, when you're building a business, you need to be able to look beyond day one, day two, day 10,000. You need to be able to plan your short-term, your mid-term, and your long-term goals. And you need to build your structures to survive your short-term, long-term, and mid-term goals. If you don't pay attention to the details, you know, you will always run into problems. Even the speaker before now, Mr. Garba, had, you know, attested to the fact that, you know, even in business, you know, the ability to adapt and, you know, take on new technologies was critical for his survival. And businesses that couldn't do that because they didn't have the right structure in place, or their structure wasn't designed to, to be adaptable, you know, they went, you know, they fell down, or you know, they fell by the wayside, you know. So it's critical that from the get-go, structures are put in place that will help the business, you know, survive long term. Some of the major warning signs around the breakdown of partnerships and business, you know, basically is when the vision is not clear, you know. If you're going into a partnership, you and your partner, you have to share the same vision. You have to share the same vision. I know exactly where you want to take this project, this business. You know, you have to be aligned. You know, if for any reason there's no alignment, you're going to have problems down the line. And really, what is alignment? Alignment is taking everybody's ideas and putting it to all move in the same direction. It doesn't all have to be the same idea. It doesn't have to be the same, but it's everything moving in the same direction. You know, another key issue is, of course, where there's unequal efforts or unequal contributions. As much as possible, it's important to define everyone's role in the business. You know, what is your role going to be? What are the expectations? What do we need you to do? What are your own KPIs? What are mine? You know, so that, you know, there's basically some accountability for everybody in the business. You know, and everybody is still able to, well, okay, this is what I'm supposed to contribute, and regardless, this is what I bring to the table. If I'm doing this effectively, the whole is only as strong as the total of its parts. So it's important that everybody understands what they're bringing to the business. In building structure, you have to take into consideration how are conflicts resolved. You know, if you don't plan for that, and these are the details, if you don't plan for what happens when we fight, when you fight, you will not know what to do. Yeah. Because you didn't plan for what happens when we fight, what happens when we disagree. You know? So when you're planning the details, those are the things you plan for. Okay, what is my exit strategy? Okay, you know, this is what I can bring to, there has to be a level of openness, you know. That's why you find with a lot of businesses that have succeeded, it's husband-wife, because there's that openness and there's the understanding that we're moving in the same direction, we have the same goals, we have the same objectives. We're doing this business to, provide for our family, to provide for our children, so there's that common goal and there's that common understanding, that, okay, this is what we're, and then, there's that common, how do we resolve issues when issues come up? Oftentimes with business people, this doesn't exist. And that really shouldn't be the case, because on whatever level, there's always some arbitration that can come into play that can help manage a lot of these situations. And so planning in how do we resolve issues is also critical when we're planning this sort of business. Then of course, a silent partner. A silent partner will always be a disengaged partner. As much as possible, you have to be very involved. As an entrepreneur, there are businesses that have been involved in, that I've set up, that are still running today. And it doesn't matter what time zone I'm on. Sometimes I'm up 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning because I want to attend meetings that are happening for other businesses where I have interest. Sometimes I'm falling asleep on my chair, but just my presence and, asking questions, being involved, it does a lot to, the motivation, and also just the psyche of other people involved. That, well, he didn't have to be here. It's 2 a.m. where he is, but he's making that effort, and he's asking questions. So being silent and disengaged again doesn't help, and it's also one of those signs. When you start seeing it, you start to think, maybe this is not going to work out. So for me, those are key things that you look out for, and when you plan for, you can avoid a lot of pitfalls in partnerships.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I think he's pretty much covered everything in terms of partnership. And I want to add to it that when you get into partnership, right, once we begin to see that we're looking at a bigger picture, not the individuals, right? Because when one-on-one, when you come together, it's not just two people. So it's like if all of us were to come together now that we want to do something, assuming there are, let's say, 50 people here, right? Each of us can do one. When we come together, it's not 1 times 50 that we're going to be able to do. It actually is exponential, right? If we have that as an understanding, that when we come together in partnership, you compound the output, you compound what you're trying to build. When you think of it that way, then you now reverse engineer it to say, if this thing is very important, this thing we're building is going to be beneficial to me, you, and even people beyond us. It now means that when you're building it, you have to build it right. Because often when you go into a partnership and you're just thinking me, and I want to partner with this person, and the person is also thinking, me, we. You're stuck. You know, there's that tension of you're just like two individuals. You just happen to have come together. But when there's a bigger vision that you both buy into, right? It changes the whole dynamics. And a quick example of this, right after COVID, after 2021, March of 2021, right? A group of women, in my day life, I do financial advisory, wealth management. So a group of women came to me and said, we want to form a group that invests collectively, right? That was when the whole Bitcoin and all of that, stablecoin was really crypto. People were talking about it. So another group, this group was 10. Then another group again, similar, 10 people came, the same thing. So after talking with both groups, we set them up. We set them up in such a way that they were just supposed to be contributing a particular amount each month, right? And then the idea is that they contribute and they buy a particular investment. For both groups, everything seemed identical. And I just want to talk about partnership with this point. Now, the only variable was that one group was meeting regularly. They said, what they said in the outcome was that they want this to outlive them. If this thing they're investing in really grows big, they want to be able to use part of it for community work. They even talked about a project they would do back in their home countries because they were from different parts. For the other group, it was just this thing of profit, right? Once we make it, we'll just pull out and all of that. So this group kept on, group A, let's call it group A, they kept on meeting regularly. What was happening in each of those meetings is they will come, we'll talk about values, right? We'll talk about, unity, Ubuntu, collective work, cooperative economy, faith, like all these things that we know to be Afrocentric values. The other group was doing it just more, what I'm going to get out of it, right? Now, fast forward 4 years later, from those two groups, only one is still standing. The group that didn't stand was the group that it was all about what I'm putting this, I want to get X out of it. So once the market shifted, right, the market things seemed to have gone down, like investment, everybody was in panic. They didn't know how to resolve it. Tension started flaring. Things started coming up. There was no way to address the tension. Like he talked about conflict resolution. Those things were not in place. So that group quickly disbanded. And they disbanded in a way that they even lost money because they reacted right to the market. Now, fast forward to the other group, Group A. When the market started shaking and all of that, they just called me and said, oh, come and talk to our group. There are concerns. There are questions that they have. Like people's tension, there are things they are saying is shaking the trust. And so when we came in, we did a whole presentation of explaining how markets work, what was happening, that if they waited, what they had was still good investment, but if they waited a little bit, the market will correct itself, right? And they will be able to benefit from it. So we continued doing this, just the talking, resolving any questions they had transparently. This second group, they've multiplied their investment to the point that they were able to take out funds from that collective pot to now invest in another business and now also invest in real estate. So the idea of partnership is that if you have things in place, infrastructure, structure, governance, and you have shared goals and vision and values that are beyond the individual, you will thrive. And that's the lesson for all of us, that as we begin to think of this new direction of cooperating as a community, know that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we have to build beyond ourselves. It has to be beyond us so that we can actually be able to weather the storm, because the storms will come. Thank you.
She said raised some good points there, and I would like to add to it that from her examples, everything is clear that communication is the key. Because in partnership, sometimes it happens that maybe 4 people are in the team, and then 1 or 2 people are doubting the remaining 2 people and wondering, where did the $200 go? Like last time we spent was 1,200 we put together, but they spent 1,000. But where is that 200? You don't ask them. You know who they are. You know how they are. These people are not really. I've been dealing with these people from that state before. They're always like that. I don't know why I joined. But if you go back and say, okay, in the team, let's come together. So there was 1,200 we put together. We see only $1,000. Where is the 200? Can somebody answer? That is being transparent. That's being like clearing everything that is in your mind. Communicate. Oh, the 200 was spent for maybe gas or something. Oh, we didn't see that. Then that clarifies everything. Now everybody's in the same pace and everybody's understanding. But keeping things to ourselves, not asking questions, not communicating clearly, and keeping it in the mind that maybe people from this state don't do well, or from this country, I knew I shouldn't have joined, I should have listened to my wife, my husband, they said it, but no, just communicate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's such a rich answer. In fact, those are rich answers. I hear the importance of vision, communication, all these structures and tools in place. So it's not enough that, oh, we both like fashion, let's go into business. Do we have the same values about fashion? So that when we get a request for a type of outfit, we're not wondering how much does it make, So we must invest in communication, in having aligned values, so that we can do partnership right. All right, I'm going to ask one last question because it's important that we hear from you and answer your questions. So if you have questions ready, I think we have space for about 3 questions from the audience, but I'll ask one last question quickly, and then you can ask your question. So, okay, I have one person that has a question. I have 2, I have 3, thank you. So after this last question, we'll go to the audience for our questions. Maria mentioned something earlier when she was answering the first question about this idea that if we're partners, it makes my success less. For some of us, especially if you school in Nigeria, when 2 people have first position, there's a way your first position is lower than if it was only 1 person that had first position. So just that idea that shared success or shared partnership leads to a lesser badge of honor. How can we address that and just let people know that partnerships does not dilute your success, instead it amplifies it? Is there anything you can say to that?
Okay, so going back to the first comments, it's going to take a complete reorientation of the mindset, when it comes to partnership. Some people might partnership does not because a lot of people consider that, oh, having to partner or having someone to help is a show of weakness, which is quite the opposite. It's actually a sign of strength. For me, I think back to the idea of individualism, collective building, and I almost feel as if it's one of those bad legacies we've kept from the colonial times, if I may say so, because I feel that in the West there's individualism is a big deal. They even the way they live their lives, the way we lived as a village, they don't have that mentality. The way it is natural for us to, as our parents age, your parents don't go to an old people's home. No, your parents, they live with one of the children and you take care of your parents. For them, our parents here, because they want to live their own life, that sense of individualism, that sense of, oh, I'm on my own, it's a Western thing. It's not an African thing, but as part of the whole colonial thing, I think they left that very bad legacy with us. So a lot of us feel, we're not comfortable in the collective building. Beyond our extended families, some people can't see beyond. Some people can't even see beyond their nuclear families. Talk less, they have extended families. Some people now, business community or community. Building with a community. They can't see beyond it. So it will take a complete reorientation of our mindsets. That is, of course, is not helped, by the lack of structure and accountability within the community. That's why when I was referencing my question to Mr. Garba earlier, and I mentioned, having some sort of directory and, it's almost like an African chamber that sort of regulates, because without, legal and financial frameworks in place, inevitably, bad news will find bad news. Things will always find their way into it, but if we have proper structures, legal and financial structures in place, even within the community to regulate things, it will help people, it will help build people's trust within those institutions, within those structures, and help people to, give it their all and be more open-minded to collective building. So for me, those are little things that we need to look at. But it all has to start, like Julia said, from within. If we are not the change makers we want, then we haven't even started the journey. And if you think about everything, even back to the corruption issues, in African governance and all this, it all boils down to that individualism. Somebody wants to sit on the lion's share and doesn't want to build the community around him, and it's very wrong. In my experience, if everyone in this room is successful and everyone in this room is doing well, it makes my success even better, even sweeter. I currently have a business downtown in London. It's a restaurant, and we're on a thing they call Restaurant Row. And even when we met with the city to discuss it, I kept pushing for collective benefits for all the restaurants on that row. Because as a community, if the entire row is doing well, and people, the whole Londoners are flocking downtown, and it's booming, it's going to benefit everyone. Because the guy next to me, even if his food is better than mine, he has only 20 chairs. His chairs will finish. If there are 50 people, they will come and look for my own 20 chairs to sit down. So I will, by extension, I will be successful. So it's to adopt that mindset, have that mindset, and try and build, from that standpoint.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sometimes I feel like also the idea of knowing how big the goal, the project you're working on will grow. So say if in your mind you're thinking, we are growing Amazon. Think of it today that somebody calls the three of you who came together and built Amazon. It will feel great that I'm part of Amazon, I'm part of a very big project, I'm part of a very big business. But when we are thinking of it that, we are opening maybe an online store, you might have like 20 or 30 people shopping. So if it's me and 3 other people, it will look like a very, very small business. Maybe we are making maybe $10 to $20 each of us. But if you think of it being as big as Amazon, and they say, we are billionaires, 3 of us are billionaires, so this has $1 billion, this has $1 billion, and the other one has $1 billion. It feels great still being part of a big thing, although you don't own it all, but you're still part of the big thing. But if you say, okay, fine, I'm not sharing with anybody, I'm just gonna open this store by myself, I'm gonna do everything, then it grows to make maybe $500 a month, and you're going to say, I have an online store, but how much are you making? It won't feel as great as the big business. So I think just changing the mindset of how big you can grow when you have a team, you make us more motivated to, collaborate and work together.
Thank you. I want to share, thank you so much for that, both of you. I want to share just 3 short stories about partnership and that question you asked of, because I really love that question of when you have 2 people having first, and you feel some kind of way. So this idea, this tension of what success is, like this idea of if I'm the only one, right? If I'm this big Iroko tree, then that's success. But like you rightly said, you feel better when it's a collective, like you're advocating for all the restaurants, because if your neighbor does well, you're doing well. And I'll use, the first example I'm going to use is something we're all familiar with, Afrobeat, right? Afrobeat is now global, right? Afrobeat is an example of the power of collaboration because they built an ecosystem. And what happens when you build an ecosystem is, it's not just one person saying, I'm building for myself, I want to be a star. If it were just one musician that was doing well, right, globally, do you think it would have this much power? No. But what happened is that they built an ecosystem where they started collaborating. The producers, the studios, the songwriters, all of that. And what that does for you is that you realize you're not the only person. You have a community to lean on. And when you have a community to lean on, you can be authentic. You're no longer trying to do the music that the West says is the right way to do music. You're now speaking in your own language, right? Whether it's pidgin, whether it's, whatever language that is. And now, collectively, you have a sound that the world is willing to pay for. And so when Burna Boy comes for a concert, right? You have, the stadium is filled up. Another musician, say Whiskey, come. Again, the stadium is filled. That's the power of the collective. Because now you've built an ecosystem beyond your community. You've now made that thing global. That's one. The second example I want to use is in terms of even the food that we eat, right? And I'll use a project that we're working on now. So everybody, once you talk about African countries, we're always talking about the Jollof wars, right? Different African countries. My Jollof is better. Ghana says, Nigeria says, Senegal, and all that. And also from Jollof now, right? If you think of it, ask yourself, why is it that you can go to any any mall and find a Chinese food court. You can go to any street, really, and find shawarma, right? Like the Mediterranean, and whether it's Lebanese or from any of those countries. I've been in Canada for 25 years. At some point, you had to travel hours before you could buy shawarma. But what happened? Ecosystem effect. You saw communities coming together, taking one staple food that they knew they could make universal, and building systems around it, building structures around it, creating franchises around it, and it's now everywhere, right? My question is, why haven't we been able to do that for Jollof? Because we're still separate, right? Why haven't we been able to do that for, say, Chin Chin? Again, because we're still separate. So this project that we're working on now is a Chin Chin project where we got a group of young black students to try different Chin Chin brands. And then they voted which ones they really liked, right? And why did we go younger? Because they are the ones that have the disposable income to buy Chin Chin, and they beyond them, they have peer groups that are not black or African. The point I'm making is there are only 1.5 million blacks in Canada, thereabout. Anything we're building that we want to be universal, that we want to build wealth from, cannot be limited to our community alone. We must be thinking of ecosystem effect, network effect. How do you take this thing and make it universal? How do you take a product, instead of individual, like these young kids, they tasted it, and one of them asked a question. I said, why don't we have snacks like this in vending machines? Out of that question, they're doing a project around it. Seeking grants to be able to create vending machine, particular spots that would have Afrocentric snacks. Because if you have chin-chin in every convenience store, what happens? Everybody that makes chin-chin suddenly has a big market to sell to. If you have Jollof in parks, in stores, in grocery stores, like as a franchise, now everybody who's very good at Jollof, the cooks, the people that source the product, the people that are doing the recipe, you have a whole value chain that you've created for the community. That's the second example. The final example I'm going to use is something that we're actively doing now. Again, partnership. Everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with a Susu, a Jo. If you're Kenyan, Chama, a Kub, it's called different names in different countries, right? Where a group of people come together, save money, and each month they rotate the funds right around. When I came to Canada some 25 years ago, right, I met, there's a young lady, another friend of mine, we were young then, so when I say young lady, permit me. So we met and we were talking about, you know, how can we come together? Then we didn't even know there were grants and all these things available, right? We said, how can we come together and create something where we can help other new immigrants that are coming to settle in? And we didn't know there were grants available. So the first question we asked, how are we going to fund this thing? And we said, we can start doing a Susu now. We've always done it. So imagine a group of women coming together. You're now collecting the fund, but instead of rotating the money amongst ourselves, we're putting it together. And we said, oh, when we put it together, let's invest it in something so that that money is growing, but we always have somewhere to pull money from when we need to help anyone, right? Now, fast forward years later, COVID now happened. And when COVID happened, we saw the devastation for our community. It affected everyone, but the Black community in particular. We started seeing huge gaps. What was the gap? The government released a lot of funding, right, to our people. But guess what? If someone has not managed $1 million before, and you suddenly give them 1 million, and they did not plan to receive that 1 million, do you think it's a good thing? That's what's happening in our community now. So there were many groups that received funding, many businesses that received. These are businesses that are coming to us and telling us this is the problem we're having now. They received those funds, but because they didn't have what I call the neurology, they've not practiced managing small funds very well and growing incrementally. So when they got that huge amount, those that were not prepared, it became like a curse. Because they bought property, they did this, they did that, they did that. All of a sudden, there are no grants anymore. All of a sudden, the loans are being asked for, right? So, but the groups that survive, the groups that have always come together to contribute their own collectively and manage their own collectively with governance structures, when they received the big funding, they knew exactly what to do with it. They were like, we had these 3 projects we were saying we didn't have funds for. Now the funds are here. You have the systems of accountability. You have all of that. They could thrive. The other thing that happened is that those groups that were contributing, and there are many of them across different African communities, right? Even in the Caribbean community, because they also do Susu. What was now happening with a lot of those groups is that they realized that they had power. Because when you've been able to save money collectively and invest money collectively, you now have a bargaining power to go ask for more. Right? Yeah. So what they now started doing was say, okay, you know what, we need 2 million to be able to do this business, to buy a couple of franchises. Let's get 200 of us together and do X amount every month. We'll easily raise. We had a group that did this in like 7 months. They did 600 and something thousand just from contributing. With that seed money, they were able to go apply for a grant. But they're applying for a grant from a place of power. Because in the grant application, they're saying, this is what we've done by our collective effort. We now want to scale it. We now want in the multiples, in the millions, right? The point I'm making is for partnership, start small. Let's decide today, this community, that we want to start something. Because once we decide, the things that we need to do, we'll start seeing the resources. Once we decide, the behaviors that we know have been keeping us back, we will now begin to address them. And I love how my brother keeps talking about reorientation. I call it cognitive restructuring. Because what we don't know, we don't know. And what we've not been taught, we all schooled under a colonial type of educational system. Individualism, succeed, only you must be first, only you must be this, only you must, and we threw away the baby and the bathwater. What's the baby and the bathwater? The ways we were pre-colonial times, which was a collectivist, cooperative economy. So now, the challenge I'm posing for everyone is, when you're coming from whatever countries you're coming from, think of all the challenges that that country had. Corruption, bad roads, no electricity, unstable internet, no regulation. Like, if I were to use Nigeria, even the police is a problem. Like just the judiciary, all those things, list all of them down. And then think of Canada and ask yourself honestly, does Canada solve that? Have they been able to solve that problem? It might not be perfect, but you know for sure that there's structure here, that there's legal systems here that work, that the police is not going to stop you on the road and ask for bribe, right? That there's electricity, and there's all of that. And then even when we as a community say there's no capital, I always say, please, let's be careful and reframe that. Because you see, we live in a capitalist society. And the one thing about a capitalist society is that the money will follow value. And we heard all the speakers say it earlier today. If you have something of value, you can show the track record. The investor wants to make money. If you come prepared, you will find someone to invest in you. So when we say there's no capital, I challenge everyone. What is it that the banks want? What is it that the credit unions want? So to tie it up, final example with accessing capital. Individually, I had some opportunity to access capital. And then I told a few of my friends in our cooperative, and they said, listen, if you've done this and improved your credit and you're able to access this much, perhaps we need to take a pause. Instead of us individually going to access it, let's actually create a community and teach everybody how to build their credit. We created a course for it, Road to 800. If you get your credit score to 800 and above, and you have your taxes, and you have your business plan, and you go to a financial institution, you will get the capital, most likely. But we didn't even stop there. We said, oh, instead of us going individually to the financial institution, we are now a cooperative. Let the cooperative go to the financial institution and say, hey, we have a community of people that have built their credit or are building their credit. They have their business plans ready. What else do you need to give them capital? And they give us the requirement. And we say, okay, can you give us somebody that will teach this community what it is you need so that we're prepared? Right? And now, because you're prepared, you're going as a group. And people can access. And in terms of repayment, the group is holding themselves accountable. We're literally calling each other a day before. Your loan is due today. Please pay. Don't be late. Because if you're late, it affects all of us. I challenge the African community. We can be that people. That is it. We can be that people. And we can access. This is a land of opportunities. All the things we said we're running away from, and please, let's not come here and start looking for new excuses. Let's do the inner work. It's the work of behavior, of values, of being accountable, right? And then we'll thrive. Ubuntu, I am because we are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Call me biased, but I feel like I have the best panel because sound principles, practical examples, stories to drive it home. All right, because of our time, we will take our questions.
Yes. Sorry.
We will take our questions. Please, straight to the point, and one speaker will answer one question very briefly.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you. So
we
just two
already
question,
yes.
and we'll take it all at the same time.
Yes, please.
That was very wonderful and very beautiful. My name is Jacqueline, and when you spoke about chinchin, I was just thinking about my husband's chinchin. He makes the best chinchin in the world. And we need to commercialize it. So the question I want to ask is about difficult conversations in partnerships. I've worked in corporate environments, and in a corporate environment, you will have trainings. You would have other organizations come out and talk about, these things. But when you're having small businesses or small partnerships, there's always going to be conflict. As far as there's a relationship, there would always be a conflict. So the question is, how do partners prepare for difficult conversations? Is it better for them to outsource it? Should they train themselves? Should they take courses? Just like what you have done, you have gone out there to get, like with your cooperative, to get someone to come and talk to you about certain things. So in that same way, because we all have different personalities, and like I'm a sucker for building relationships, I'm a sucker for partnerships, but I know a lot of people are not like that. And so it's difficult to have those, conversations with them. I'm always ready to resolve a conversation, but the other party is probably thinking another thing, that maybe this person, had a different agenda. But when you talk it out, you realize, oh, this wasn't even a big deal at all. So what do you advise for entrepreneurs who are in a partnership business together to be able to have those conversations? So that's one. Number two, based on what you said about partnership, I just want to say something to Nora. Now, she has given you an idea, which is, as a hair business, if you're trying to get a space, you can get a space with someone who is probably into a spa business, or into African print. You partner together, and that way you're providing not just one service, but two services. Both of you win.